Today, Andrew Carnegie's name is mostly remembered because of the various institutions and the companies and foundations he established that are still going strong. My name is Tan. As a fan of the ideas that Carnegie left behind, and only knowing him through the books he wrote, I decided to visit his birthplace, Dunfermline, Scotland, to see if I could learn a little more about Carnegie's story from some other people's perspectives. This is Jennifer Jones, co-manager at the Andrew Carnegie Birthplace Museum.
Dunfermline is underrated, I always feel. So I always felt that it was sort of like the little sister or the dodgy cousin of Edinburgh or something, but we try to work by Andrew Carnegie used to say, try it and fail and move on, just give it a go. And that's how we try to work. That's how we try to encourage all the staff. It's very much the ethos that we work by here. Just be creative and give it a go.
This is Frank Connolly, a historian, ambassador, and expert in all things Dunfermline.
Well, as children, you couldn't escape it. There was a phrase that was in use at that time. And it was like if somebody asked their parents for something, I don't know, we're coming up to Christmas, aren't we? So a Christmas present, and it was maybe a bit expensive. The phrase would be, "Who do you think I am? Andrew Carnegie."
Yes, Andrew Carnegie was at one time the richest man in the world before giving away 90% of his fortune. I remember him as a man who described his world as heaven, and a man who described his nature as optimistic. So in other words, he was both rich and happy. I wanted to find out if his happiness was a result of him being rich, or did he get rich as a result of him being happy? Which came first? Here's a passage from his autobiography. True indeed. Most of the troubles of humanity are imaginary and should be laughed out of court. It is folly to cross a bridge until you come to it, or to bid the devil good morning until you meet him. Perfect folly. All is well until the stroke falls, and even then, 9 times out of 10, it is not so bad as anticipated. A wise man is the confirmed optimist. It seems that he liked to write positive words intended to encourage. Frank wonders if it's difficult to be encouraging and positive today.
It's hard to be positive because if Carnegie was walking with us today, it's a very different world from the one that he, I suppose, departed from in 1919.
You don't think he'd be optimistic today?
Well, I mean, given some of the political things that are going on and his aversion to all wars, I think he would be disappointed that, for example, his peace palace, which was set up to try and resolve disputes before they go to war, you can see without naming the different situations around the world today, but for example, the situation in Ukraine, he would have thought that his institution would have helped to prevent, disputes from that, which have always got the danger of getting bigger. But on a positive note, we are now in the...
Where are we?
We're in Pittencrieff Park, which Carnegie is on record as saying was his greatest gift to the people of Dunfermline, because he wasn't allowed...
It's one of my favourite passages in the autobiography. Thus, Pittencrieff Glen is the most soul-satisfying public gift I ever made, or ever can make. It is poetic justice that the grandson of Thomas Morrison, radical leader in his day, nephew of Bailey Morrison, his son and successor, and above all, son of my sainted father and my most heroic mother, should arise and dispossess the lairds, should become the agent for conveying the glen and park to the people of Dunfermline forever. It is a true romance which no air castle can quite equal or fiction conceive. The hand of destiny seems to hover over it, and I hear something whispering, "Not altogether in vain have you lived. Not altogether in vain." It's understandable why he was so happy about this. He strongly believed that parks and recreational spaces in towns gave people pleasure. Citing the ancient quote, "Man does not live by bread alone."
We're just coming, and if you look over the greenhouses, you'll see the Dunfermline Abbey poking its 1,000-year-old head.
The Dunfermline Abbey. Andrew Carnegie writes about it with so much love and reverence, I couldn't help but feel the magic inside these walls. The tomb of the Bruce is in the centre of the abbey. St. Margaret's tomb is near, and many of the royal folk lie sleeping close around. Fortunate indeed, the child who first sees the light in that romantic town which occupies high ground 3 miles north of the Firth of Forth, overlooking the sea, with Edinburgh in sight to the south, and to the north, the peaks of the Ochils clearly in view. All is still redolent of the mighty past, when Dunfermline was both nationally and religiously the capital of Scotland. The child privileged to develop amid such surroundings absorbs poetry and romance with the air he breathes, assimilates history and tradition as he gazes around. These become to him his real world in childhood. The ideal is the ever-present real. All of this seems to suggest that he was happy as a child. And since we know his family experienced a lot of poverty while they were living in Dunfermline, we can consider the idea that his happiness during childhood was not caused by having money. So it seems happiness may have come first, and the monetary success came as a result of him being first and foremost optimistic and happy. Let's use his words and call it a sunny disposition.
And this is the world's first ever Carnegie Library that you're coming into. This is actually the Carnegie Library and Galleries, which was built onto the original Carnegie Library, which is still in existence. I think it was a £15 million new extension that was added on.
That's what he asked people to do. I'll build it, but you maintain
He always wanted buy-in, so he didn't just give a gift. So if he gave a library, so for example in Dunfermline, when he gifted the library, it was up to the local councillors at that stage to make sure there was enough that they would buy the books. Yeah. So it ensured that there was a bit of a buy-in.
He wanted buy-in. I think this was an example of his ability to observe human nature. We'll get back to this in a few moments, but first, a little more context on why he loved libraries so much. After retiring from business in 1901, building libraries became an obsession for Andrew Carnegie, and he built over 2,500 of them around the world. The reason for this is that he credits having access to books as a major factor that drove his success. And he first got access to books in the 1850s, when businessman and philanthropist Colonel James Anderson opened his home library for free to working boys in Allegheny, Pennsylvania. Andrew Carnegie, who at the time was working as a messenger boy in this town, benefited from this and was forever grateful. This is Mark MacLeod, co-manager at the Andrew Carnegie Birthplace Museum.
Colonel Anderson opened his books to teenage boys, apprentices, those who couldn't afford to buy the books.
My dear friend Tom Miller, one of the inner circle, lived near Colonel Anderson and introduced me to him. And in this way, the windows were opened in the walls of my dungeon, through which the light of knowledge streamed in. Every day's toil and even the long hours of night service were lightened by the book which I carried about with me and read in the intervals that could be snatched from duty. And the future was made bright by the thought that when Saturday came, a new volume could be obtained.
In our display here, we have several books that have come from the Colonel Anderson Library. And that is one piece of the puzzle as to, well, how is Andrew Carnegie going to get rid of all his money? One piece was, I'll build libraries for people so that they can actually get access to books for free. And the way he gave libraries away was, I'll build the building for you, I'll leave you to fill it.
This is Sharon McCall, Local Studies Supervisor at the Carnegie Dunfermline Library.
So this is the new building.
Yeah.
Okay, so this opened 5 years ago. The area you're currently standing in tan, from the windows there, to the entrance there, to the back wall over here, and to the window over here, and one floor upstairs, is Carnegie's original, first ever library of the world. And that's so important. It's not London, it's not Pittsburgh, it's not America, it's here. Foundation stone was laid by his mother, Margaret Carnegie, on the 27th of July, 1881.
Yes.
He gave the town £5,000 to build the library, which was a considerable sum of money from his own personal pocket.
There was no use to which money could be applied, so productive of good to boys and girls who have good within them and ability and ambition to develop it, as the founding of a public library in a community which is willing to support it as a municipal institution. I am sure that the future of those libraries I have been privileged to found will prove the correctness of this opinion. For if one boy in each library district, by having access to one of these libraries, is half as much benefited as I was by having access to Colonel Anderson's 400 well-worn volumes, I shall consider they have not been established in vain.
Carnegie only funded the buildings. He would not fund the paperwork, he wouldn't fund the staff, because he felt that the community and the local councillors had to take control of it to make it work. It then becomes a community project.
That's his model. I'll build it for you, which is expensive, but you need to fill it. You need to heat it, staff it, and put all the books in it. He also expressed a preference for having a children's area, a place for debate, a place to read the newspapers, a place for talks, because he saw it as a way that the communities could learn together and go and work together. So the model that he was using there was replicated, say, 2,800 times across the world.
Andrew Carnegie believed that we only achieve success if we take the initial action, if we invest energy and apply the initial effort ourselves. He believed that completely free handouts were harmful because they discourage action. That's why he built public libraries in communities that were willing to support it and invest energy. He understood that if there's no opportunity for people to spend energy, naturally they will conserve energy, which means they will not develop their latent qualities, they will not flourish, and they will not realize their potential.
He wasn't giving it away just for the sake of giving it away. He did have his rules, but he also had the freedom to say to the people, well, fill it with the books that you want to, but you are taking responsibility for it. And if he did give a building, Carnegie Hall is another example, yes, I'll build it for you. You will take responsibility for it after I've built it. He was wanting to build it and then pass it on. He didn't want to be the owner of all this real estate throughout the whole planet. It was a case of you take responsibility for your own buildings.
In bestowing charity, the main consideration should be to help those who will help themselves. To provide part of the means by which those who desire to improve may do so. to give those who desire to rise the aids by which they may rise. To assist, but rarely or never to do all. Neither the individual nor the race is improved by almsgiving.
People who were laying the foundation stone, and the stonemason was saying, what would you like above it or below it? And he didn't know what he wanted, so he came up with a motto he used quite frequently called, let there be light. And I believe that let there be light means that you come in and you be enlightened. And I say that I've been here for 30 years. I've come in this building every single day for 30 years I've been working, and I've learnt something.
As mentioned earlier, Andrew Carnegie gave away 90% of all his money before he died. A lot of it went to building libraries around the world, but not all. He also spent money on building schools and universities, cultural organizations, scientific research institutions, and peace initiatives. Here's a clipping from the New York Tribune published the day after his death in 1919, detailing his spending. In total, Andrew Carnegie gave away around $350 million during his lifetime, which would be equivalent to billions of dollars in today's currency. As one of the leading industrialists who amassed great wealth after the Industrial Revolution, Andrew Carnegie was the first to publicly push the idea that the rich have a moral duty of giving away their fortunes. There is but one right mode of using enormous fortunes, namely that the possessors from time to time during their own lives should so administer these as to promote the permanent good to the communities from which they were gathered. This is Matt Stewart, entrepreneur and business owner.
For 21 years I've been running my business, Entrepreneur Me. You know, and I could go into the boring part of how that started and things, but I guess Carnegie has always been the foundation of Entrepreneur Me. Here in sleepy little Scotland, we seem to think that entrepreneurship is about wealth for some. And it's, you know, when you study Carnegie, you understand that Carnegie was about prosperity and wealth for everyone.
The millionaire will be but a trustee for the poor, entrusted for a season with a great part of the increased wealth of the community. Andrew Carnegie frequently wrote that extremely wealthy people should see themselves as not owning the money, but simply as looking after the money, temporary holder of the assets with a job to administer it for the community. Which part of his philosophy resonates with you the most? What makes you a Carnegie fan?
The biggest part, it's very easy for me to say, the biggest part is definitely the fact that you should become successful. There's nothing wrong with using your God-given mental talents to create something magnificent. You should do as much as you can, become as successful as you can, make as much money as you can, but then give it all away. Because once you've developed your mental capacities to create, you can create and create and create and create and do so much good. And that's what Carnegie did, really, yeah.
This is Heather Anderson, who grew up very close to Carnegie's birthplace as a young girl and was deeply affected by his story.
I couldn't believe that this, even when I was little, that he gifted us the Glen, Pittencrieff Park, because it was my playground, because I stayed there. And we had the playground on our doorstep. And even though I was little, I was in such awe that somebody would actually give this massive, wonderful children's paradise as a gift. What kind of person would do this? What kind of kind man would do this, you know? And he says that every child born in Dunfermline is blessed. Blessed is the child who first sees the light of day in Dunfermline. That was me, you know, and my children. He's just very special to me. And that's why I donated the lectern. It was my birthday 5 years ago, and I thought, well, I don't need anything. And I thought, what will I do? I know what I'll do. I'll see what they want. And I was thinking about a bench out in the garden, and they said, well, that's lovely, but we have a bench, and another one would be fine. But what we need is a lectern. So I chose his words, "Fortunate indeed, the child who first sees the light of day in that romantic town." These words by Andrew Carnegie encapsulate so eloquently the love and pride that Heather Anderson, formerly of 26 Prada Lane, feels for her birthplace. Heather, husband Bob, children Deborah, Paul and Liam, donated this lectern in 2012 in memory of her parents, Effie Grant and Andrew Whitelaw. It was difficult to know what to put, you know. So this is the lectern, and many, many people have stood there, and I feel so proud.
Before the Industrial Revolution, the primary ways of acquiring wealth were often limited to land ownership, inheritance, conquest, and plunder. After the Industrial Revolution, Andrew Carnegie, along with the other visionary titans of the late 19th century, demonstrated new ways to wealth through entrepreneurship, invention, investing capital, manufacturing, and global trade. Ways that simultaneously lifted human society out of poverty. And as the first person to publicly urge to his peers the responsibility they have to distribute the large amounts of wealth that they've gathered, Andrew Carnegie's influence can still be seen today in organizations like the Giving Pledge, founded by Warren Buffett, Melinda Gates, and Bill Gates. A growing community of the richest people in the world using the majority of their money to address some of the world's biggest challenges. And of course, there are the trusts and institutions founded by Andrew Carnegie himself, still impacting the world today. This is Gillian Taylor, the CEO of the Carnegie Dunfermline Trust.
You can almost, I can almost feel him writing it. So he's writing to his first trustees, and he's asking them to spread sweetness and light. So, you know, we quite often in the boardroom when trustees are deciding on things, we'll go back to that statement. Is this going to spread sweetness and light to the people of Dunfermline? Yes, it is. So yes, we'll fund that. To be aspirational for our city, to kind of say, right, okay, this is, you know, what do we want? What do we want the city that Andrew Carnegie would have wanted, and encourage entrepreneurs, encourage business, and encourage tourists to come, but at the same time have that well-being in the centre, that sweetness and light, you know, that kind of, but we as a city will look out for our people, and we will help our people as well. So the trust will continue to do that. You know, it will evolve and change as time goes on. But I would like to think that we will always be here to carry on Andrew's legacy in his hometown, because he obviously loved this place. And I think that's what we're here to do. So we will continue to spread sweetness and light, and we will continue to take all the golden threads that we can find and carry on his work.
You know, now that I've had a chance to think about it, that he was happy as a child before getting the money, he was happy during the process of getting the money, and he was happy after giving away all the money. I believe if Andrew Carnegie were to see this world today, he would be very pleased at the progress we've made in the past 100 years. And knowing him as I do, I think he would be fully confident that the next 100 years will be even better.